Good evening to everybody, esteemed colleagues, dear Iranian freedom fighters, especially those who are speaking from within the Iran. I know it needs a lot of courage and it's a huge risk. A lot have been said today about the situation in Iran, and I don't want to repeat about a person who has been appointed as a president and who was involved in a very serious crime against humanity. I want to talk about some, let's say, attitude towards the events in Iran, in Europe. Today we hear talks about the possibility that the United States sanctions are removed as a part of a revival of nuclear accord. And it's warmly supported by some EU member states, such as France and Germany, and in a strange company, together with China. We can just imagine how tempting it would be for the mullahs regime to use oil revenues to fund his economic and military goals, and to strengthen the internal pressure apparatus. But even in this difficult situation, at home, it should be clear that Raisi is not prepared to compromise on nuclear talks. And in his first interview with the media, he has made it clear that it is the West who should make all the sided concessions. Nevertheless, the question remains, even if he did accept to compromise on issues like nuclear, ballistic missiles, destabilizing activities in the region, the question remains, should Europe turn its back to its democratic human rights principles and hold dialogue with a man who is a criminal against humanity? I am sure that no, or at least I hope. The EU has not sanctioned any Iranians for human rights violations since 2013, when an interim deal on Iran's nuclear program was reached, despite major abuses, such as those detailed in a United Nations report released this March. But the EU has several times condemned Tehran for the human rights violations, including the execution by hanging of dissidents, such as journalist Rohollah Zam last December. Just in April 2021, after 8 years of silence, the European Parliament voted to impose sanctions on Iran in the framework of the EU Global Human Rights Sanctions regime, so-called EU Magnitsky Act, established by the Council of Ministers in December. The Council then decided to extend its restrictive measures responding to a serious human rights violations in Iran until 13th April 2022, adding 8 persons and 3 entities to the sanctions list in view of their role in the violent response to the November 2019 demonstrations in Iran. This modest list now comprises a total of 89 individuals and 4 entities. Dear colleagues, we cannot forget with whom we are dealing. Iran is, after China, the country that persecutes the opposition by using capital execution. They execute sportsmen, journalists, and even minors in large numbers. The case of Swedish Iranian national Ahmad Reza Jalali is just one more example of the regime's brutality. The EU Parliament last Wednesday passed a resolution demanded Jalali's immediate release, also urging the sanctions be imposed on Iranian regime officials for the imprisonment and executions of EU nationals. I'm personally glad that the EU Parliament called on the European Council, I'm quoting, to consider further targeted sanctions, including freezing the assets of the Iranian regime officials and entities involved in the arbitrary detention and sentencing to death of EU nationals, including in the event of Ahmad Reza Jalali's continued detention, either using the current EU human rights sanctions regime against Iran or the EU's global human rights sanctions regime. End of quote. This is a very important, but it's not enough, as the resolution against the Iranian regime's human rights violation, unfortunately, is not binding. And here I just want to express my sincere support to the Slovenian Prime Minister Janša, later supported by Senator Lieberman. We have to push for President Raisi to be investigated by the International Court of Justice for crimes against humanity, including murder, forced disappearance, and torture. One might say that we as Europeans have no other choice but to talk with him, as we have no other interlocutor in Iran. But actually, there is an interlocutor in Iran to whom we can talk. If we stand on the side of Iranian people who have boycotted the recent presidential elections and do not want Raisi as their president, then we will see that Iran has a democratic alternative, the National Council of Resistance of Iran. Let us stand with them and the people of Iran, and let us force this theocratic dictatorship to understand that Europe will not turn a blind eye to the crimes committed by this regime, and particularly by Raisi. One might say that we Lithuanians are far away from Iran and could not understand Iranian people's wishes. Believe me, we do, because Lithuania just 30 years ago returned back its freedom from communist dictatorship, from the oppressions, from the tortures, from deportees. And we know what does it mean to live in bondage. Once again, I wish Iranian people all the best, and please know Lithuania always will stand with you in the same way as we now today standing with the democratic Belarusian opposition, as we stand today with the Russian democratic opposition. Thank you for your kind attention.